I'm grateful for you joining me today in this time to talk about the Academy of Preachers, Dwight. I'd like to start with just going back to the beginning. Where did you get the idea for the Academy of Preachers? What was your inspiration?
Well, I'll tell you two stories, two quick stories. I was on the faculty of Georgetown College at the time, and I had just launched my meeting house media platform. At the time, it was a radio show, conversations on religion and American life. But I was also directing a program, a Lilly-funded program called Programs for the Theological Exploration of Vocation. We were one of 88 schools that had one of these programs. And one of the main features was to help young people decide about their vocation. It turned out, in conversation with my team, my leaders, that we had a lot of people, a lot of young people who were interested in going into the ministry, but very few of them interested in preaching. Mm. And we had a round table talking about this, about what does this mean? What could we do about it? And we actually sketched out a program called the Royal Springs Society of Preaching or something like that. Royal Springs was the original name of Georgetown. So this is when we first started talking about it. And then in 2008, I went up to the endowment to ask them to fund my meeting house stuff. And in the small talk leading up to my big presentation, I had a big leather book, all kinds of facts. I'd interviewed people, I'd read material about religion and American life. But in the small talk leading up to this, we got to talking about other things, including this program for the theological exploration of vocation, and what we had found, that our kids were interested in gospel work. They were interested in ministry, but not in preaching. Well, I was talking to the two leaders up there at the Lilly Endowment. They knew that what I was describing was not isolated to Georgetown College. I did not know this, but they knew what was going on around the country. And they asked me what ideas we had, and I began to talk about our ideas, and totally spontaneous. I had not prepared for this. And for 30 minutes, those two gentlemen, including Chris Goebel, who's now the vice president, quizzed me about our ideas. I was eager to get to my big presentation on something else, and they finally said, this is what we want you to do. You write a grant, we'll give you the money, and you can start in January. That's what happened. It was the discernment, really, of the people at the Lilly Endowment, that knowing what the nation needed was the key thing.
Yeah, it's a great example of the value of being in conversation with people and learning what they know that you don't know, and then coming up with a good idea together. I hadn't heard part of that story. That's exciting for me to hear that bit of history. And of course, I entered into this conversation back in the very first one, 2019. Myself and one of my faculty members, Bob Bird at that time, and one of our students, Larry Terrell Crudup, who's now a pastor in South Carolina, went up there. Well, I remember that was the very first one, and I brought Larry up, and he preached this amazing sermon on Ezekiel 37, the dry bones. I still remember that first time I ever heard him preach, and I remember thinking, man, this young man, he's got what it takes. It's going to be fun to watch him grow. And now that's That's my goodness, 16, 17 years later, and he's done well with his ministry. So I'm wondering, like, I took students every year but one, all 10 of those years, and I forget why I didn't take them that one year. But lots of great experiences. Students' lives were changed by it. So I wonder if you might just tell me this, what was one of the best things that came out of the AOP as you dreamed it and then as you brought it into reality? Do you have any good transformational stories that you could share?
Well, I would say this every day today. Now, here we are 16 years after the very first one. It was January of 2010, the first one. So here we are 16 years later. Every single day on my Facebook feed, I read and watch the post, the pictures, the videos, the testimonies of young preachers from all over the country.
Mm.
The thing that most interests me, of course, is their journeys from then to now. I think about John J. Alvaro, who was a student at the time, but now he's the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Pasadena, California, right in the middle of the fires. What was that, last year? And ministering to all those people. I talked to him during all of that. And then, of course, just this past year, David Black, one of our young preachers from New England, is now the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church of Chicago. And you probably don't know this, but his picture appeared all over the world in all the protests up there in Chicago. The young people that we've worked with, they're now in Boston preaching and Chicago. They are in every major city in America and every small hamlet. They post on video, they post their pictures. When they're getting their degrees, they're having babies, they're getting married, they're changing churches, they're being called to a professorship. Dominic Robinson down in Austin, Texas, now teaching and preaching at Austin Seminary. You know, this warms my heart. It is the fulfillment of what I hoped would happen. But the best thing is not their connection with me, which is minor, is that their connection with one another.
Right.
These people met each other at a festival. Now they are fast friends, and they communicate. I watch them host each other at events. You mentioned over at Spartanburg, he called in his friend, Winterbourne Jones from Indianapolis, who went down there to preach for him. I drove over from Greenville to fellowship with both of them and to hear Winterbourne preach. It was a wonderful experience, but those two young preachers became fast friends because of the Academy of Preachers.
Right. Well, and then I have similar stories, particularly my own students uh, who um, who traveled and went on to ministry and preaching, and who are doing
Mm-hmm.
really wonderful things. And even my Facebook feed has students, some of my own, others who I met in AOP events, and you and I are in this season of our career where we're very aware of legacy, and but more than that, about what we can do to help equip the next generation as we move into the ending years of our ministry and service. And so another question I have for you related to this is, some people say that young adults are moving away from the church, and there seems to be some evidence of that. What would you say to encourage a young believer, um, uh, that the church, the gospel, that the world needs their voice? How would you encourage them to preach in this day and time?
Well, first of all, I would talk in general terms, as I have many times, about the importance of the spoken word. religious and otherwise. You look on the political scene, the social scene, the cultural scene, the people who are making a difference in the world are the people who know how to speak and articulate their convictions. I think about the rise of the TED Talks, which has been just in the last, I don't know when that started, but they've been going on maybe two decades. How millions of people have listened to these TED Talks, which is just one person getting up on a stage, not even a podium, and talking about their experience and talking about their convictions. This is changing the world. This year, 2026, is an election year in America. What are these people going to do? These candidates are going to go around to every large city and small hamlet in America and talk. They're going to get up in front of a crowd. Maybe it's 15 people in a coffee shop. Maybe it's 15,000 people in an arena. But their ability to articulate their vision for humanity, their vision for their community, their vision for life will either get them elected or they'll go home and try to find something else to do. So I think, in general, the power of the spoken word is important. I'll tell you this little story. Early on, when we were just starting the AOP, I went to a religious university, that is a university in an urban area that's connected to a religious tradition. We had every reason to believe that they would be open and interested in housing the AOP, or at least in sponsoring an event. They had graduate programs, they had student ministries. And I and my associate, Lee Huckleberry, we were given 15 minutes with the president and his whole cabinet. So it was quite rare. And I made this 15-minute pitch, this spiel, and the president of the university leaned back in his chair, waited a minute, and this is what he said. "Preaching, huh? What a quaint idea." His attitude and the word he used conveyed to me a very dismissive spirit. They, of course, did not follow through, made no connection with the AOP whatsoever. Because he thought that the power of the spoken word was a quaint idea. That very moment when we were talking to them, workers were busy on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., building the latest memorial to an influencer in American history and culture. Not to a politician, not to a general, but to a preacher named Martin Luther King. Because he knew how to articulate with passion and clarity and intelligence his vision for the future. I'm telling you, preaching and public speaking in general still is a powerful tool in civilization.
What do you say? What do you say to encourage young people to preach today?
Well, this is a very good question, especially because we live in an age that's dominated first by music in ways that earlier centuries have not been, and that we are influenced greatly by images. And these have come to dominate much communication. And a skilled communicator will learn how to use both music and images. But still, there is no substitute for the human voice and the spoken word. And as I said, here we are, 2026, in an election year.
Right.
And all over the country, in small little villages and large cities, men and women who want to hold public office are going to be traveling, getting in their car and going places and doing what? Getting up and talking.
Speaking. Yeah.
Speaking, public speaking. Sometimes they'll have 16 people in a bar, and sometimes they'll have 16,000 people in an arena. But their ability to articulate their vision of America, of their community, their state, will determine whether they get elected or not.
Right.
Their ability to articulate something that's important, something that's true, something that's transformational, will determine whether they are elected or not. Just in our lifetime, one of the greatest American orators, Barack Obama, came out of nowhere and won 2 terms as president of the United States because of his ability to speak to crowds and to sing, I might say. I remember when he went down to Charleston after at Mother Emanuel Church, those people were murdered.
Right.
He went down to speak at the funeral. He got up, gave an eloquent, passionate talk, and then he started singing.
Amazing Grace. Yeah. I've
never broken. Actually, I have once or twice in my little church do what a lot of black preachers do, and that's start singing.
Oh, Dwight, listen, in 2004, I'd already moved to Nashville, and that summer when I had my TV on in the other room, and I was in my kitchen, and I was like, who is that speaking? That guy is good. And I went to my living room and I saw Barack Obama for the first time. So when he spoke in the 2004 Democratic Convention, and I thought, that guy, he has a future. He can articulate. And I think you're right, the power of the spoken word. You know, you and I were taught to preach another lifetime ago. And preaching's changed a lot in the last 40 or 50 years since we started what we were doing. But one thing has not changed, and that is the power of the gospel to change lives. And what a wonderful and amazing thing you've been able to do in this part of your life, where you have encouraged young men and women to realize the power of the gospel to change lives. And I look forward to the Academy of Preachers continuing that ministry. We're in the process of planning an event later this spring, April the 18th, and we're looking forward to continuing the good work of encouraging young men and women, young people, to realize the power of the spoken word, particularly when it carries the gospel message. I believe there's a new generation of preachers out there, and we have the opportunity to help them realize how God can be at work in their lives. I thank you so much for talking with us today. I have one last question for you, and it's a preacher question. All right? You still do a little bit of preaching, I know. So what's your favorite thing about preaching?
Well, that's a very good question. And I would say that for preachers, preaching is an opportunity to exercise the gifts that you've been given by God, and I think that is very important. Preaching, all of us who've been preaching for very long have examples of people who have been touched, changed, inspired, comforted, motivated by things we say. Sometimes the most unlikely people, and sometimes the people you least expect in an audience. I'll tell this story. Both of you may know that my son, Ike, spent a good bit of time in jail and in prison. And 3 days before the church where I was pastor at the time was to celebrate its centennial service with all kinds of former pastors and dignitaries coming in. My son was arrested for robbery. The man who, the chief of police, the assistant chief of police, who was in my Sunday school class, knocked on my door at 6:30 in the morning to tell me that they had arrested my son. Well, I did not have to preach that Sunday, but a couple of Sundays later, I preached about the God of all comfort. And gave an invitation, as I always do, and a woman that I did not know, but a regular attender at our church, came out of the balcony down the aisle to talk to me about what she had heard, what she was feeling, and what she wanted to do. And through the tears, she said to me, "My son also is in prison today." So, when you tell your story, as you are carried along by the Holy Spirit, even the struggles that you have, it touches the lives of people who are also struggling, who need inspiration, who need help, who need a word of comfort. I preached that day, reminded the people that Jesus also spent time incarcerated, and as did many of the apostles. And it is this connection through the life of Jesus, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, through your own personal testimony, that touches and changes the lives of other people who are desperate for some good news.
Oh, Dwight, that's profound and powerful. What a wonderful way to finish our conversation about preaching, that it is that place where the gospel message meets our personal testimony and we share it with people and lives are changed. What a powerful
No question
witness.
about it.
Powerful witness. So grateful for our friendship, grateful for your imagination and vision that created the Academy of Preachers and all of the young preachers around this country and world that have been encouraged by the work of the AOP. And I'm looking forward to our continuing to do that in years to come, and look forward to being in touch with you as well.
Well, I want to give you a personal word of encouragement in this way. The most powerful thing that happened to me in this whole AOP journey were the people that I did not know who, when they heard about what was happening, wanted to be a part of it, wanted to help.
Right.
And I told you earlier the story of one university president that turned us down, but for everybody that ignored what we were doing, there were a dozen people, university presidents and deans, pastors and preachers, young people, teachers, donors, who wanted to be a part of this. And I am certain that this will happen with you as you present your work, as you invite people to walk along beside you. The AOP flourished as it did because the church needed it and because there were lots of people who wanted to be a part of it. That's what's going to happen to you as well.
Well, I'm hopeful for that. I believe in the power of the gospel. I believe God chooses people to proclaim it and to share it and to tell their story. And it's a blessing to be involved in the work of the Lord. So I look forward to seeing how God's going to work in me, in you, in Brandon, in the work of the AOP in the years to come. Blessings to you, my brother.
Good.
We'll talk soon. Hey, stay warm this weekend and maybe make a snowball or two if you get a chance.
I hope we don't get any snow down here.
Okay, we'll see. All right. Blessings now. Thank you.